Hi everyone, and welcome to video number 8, and this is the final video on the first section on Elizabethan England. The first section, Queen, Government and Religion, 1558 to 1569. What did Elizabeth do in the first 10 years or so of her reign? Now, video number 7, we'd looked at the Catholic challenge to Elizabeth. And I'd said that possibly it was a bigger challenge than the Puritans. And I said also that, Elizabeth managed to maintain it and hold it and control it fairly well for the first few years of her reign. But if you look back to video number 7, I said things were beginning to change. Things were happening which might increase the Catholic challenge. And part of the things that were happening, part of the changes, we're going to have a look at in this video, because we are looking at a very famous person called Mary Queen of Scots. Now, let's get it clear straight away. Elizabeth had a half-sister or a stepsister called Mary, Bloody Mary. She ruled before Elizabeth. When Mary, the sister, died, Elizabeth took over. But Elizabeth also had a cousin, and this is Mary Queen of Scots. Now, when I was young, 1980, one of my favourite bands, an Irish band called the Undertones, they had a song called My Perfect Cousin. Great song. My perfect cousin, what I like to do he doesn't. He's his family's pride and joy, his mother's little golden boy. Now, Elizabeth looked at Mary and said, wow, she's not my perfect cousin. Because as we will see through this video and later videos, Mary Queen of Scots, the cousin of Elizabeth, caused Elizabeth a lot of trouble and a lot of problems. And we're going to have a look at the start of that in today's video. Now, a little tip for you, always to remember that Mary Queen of Scots is Elizabeth's cousin. C for cousin and C in Scotland. Scots with a C. C for cousin. That should help you to remember it. Now, Mary Queen of Scots, she lived a very, very crazy life in a way. It's a bit like being in a thriller on television. Some really unusual things happened to Mary Queen of Scots. So let's have a look at her life and then let's see how that would impact on Elizabeth. Born 1542. She became Queen of Scotland aged 6 days. 6 days old. Now there she is. Hello, I'm Mary. I'm the Queen. But the crown doesn't fit, of course. She can't be a ruler. She's too little to be the ruler. If you're going to be the ruler, you've got to be that big. Sorry, terrible joke. We don't need that. The important thing is, Mary, where are you? There I am. Oh, poor Mary. There she is. Mary became the ruler. But of course, she could not rule. She can't be Queen of Scotland aged 6 days old. So her mother ruled for her instead until she became older. And guess what? Her mother's called Mary. I know, crazy. Too many Marys. Now, she was Mary of Guise. Now, the Guise family were very, very powerful French family. Scotland is allied to France. Now, Mary Queen of Scots, the daughter, she actually was sent to France, and at the age of 15, she married a prince called Francis. He was going to be, one day, King of France. So she's in France. Mary of Guise is ruling in Scotland. 1559, Scotland becomes a Protestant country. Ooh. The Scottish Protestant nobles took control and took power away from Mary of Guise, the Catholic mother of Mary Queen of Scots. Now, this placed cousin Elizabeth in a tricky situation. In one way, of course, Elizabeth is Protestant, so she might be happy that Scotland becomes Protestant. But, on the other hand, Mary, Queen of Scots, is the legal queen. Remember, Elizabeth believed in the divine right of kings. The king or queen gets their power from God, the divine right of monarchs. Well, here we seem to have a divine right of monarch being overthrown. Mary, Queen of Scots, is losing power. So Elizabeth would not be very pleased about that. Again, on the other hand, she might be pleased that Scotland is coming away from France, because France was Catholic and a bit of a threat. In fact, the French tried to retake control, and Elizabeth sends ships and troops to help Scotland. So straight away, Elizabeth is in a tricky situation. Then, what happens next? 1561. Mary, Queen of Scots' husband, Francis, died. So Mary returned to Scotland. That puts Mary, Queen of Scots, in a tricky position. She is a Catholic queen, but Scotland is now a Protestant country. So it's all a little bit confused at the time. 1565, a few years later, Mary, Queen of Scots, marries again, her second marriage. She marries a powerful noble called Lord Darnley, and 1566 they have a son, who they call James. Remember, Elizabeth is not married. Elizabeth has no heir. So, if Elizabeth were to die, the legal heir would be Mary, Queen of Scots, and they've already established a line because she has got a son called James. That might change the situation a little bit. So, the second marriage is not a happy marriage. Lord Darnley is a bit of an alcoholic. Now, Mary's personal secretary, a man called Rizzio, he is murdered. He is stabbed. And Lord Darnley is heavily involved in that murder. 1566. Again, so Mary, she's had some bad things in her life. Queen at 6 days, her first husband has died, her second husband has now stabbed her personal secretary. Strange things are happening. 1567, next year, Lord Darnley dies, Mary, Queen of Scots' second husband. Oh no, how did that happen? Well, the house he was in exploded. Kaboom! But when people investigated afterwards, it was clear that Lord Darnley had been strangled and the explosion hadn't killed him. So in fact, Lord Darnley had been murdered. Wow, can it get any more crazy? Well, how about this? One of the men who was very, very heavily involved and people were suspicious that he'd committed the murder of Lord Darnley is a man called Earl of Bothwell. Well, fair enough, you should say. But a few months later, Mary, Queen of Scots, married Earl of Bothwell, her third husband, who many people had thought had murdered her second husband. Wow, things really are getting a little bit strange there. The Protestant Scots were unhappy with this. So what did they do? They put Mary in prison. They forced her to abdicate. That means they forced her to say, I am no longer queen. And in return, they replaced Mary with the son, James, even though he was only 1 year old. 1 year old, back to the baby and the crown not fitting again. So Mary's in prison. Bad things seem to be happening a lot. She managed to persuade the jailer. She was kept sort of like in a castle, Lochleven Castle. She managed to persuade the jailer to let her go. She then raised an army, and now we have Mary, Queen of Scots, with her army fighting a battle in Scotland against her own Protestant Scottish nobles, the Battle of Langside near Glasgow. At that battle, Mary, Queen of Scots, is defeated. Wow. Things have happened. What can she do? She can't really stay in Scotland because of all that's happened. She runs away. She gets on a boat and the boat sails down to England. Lands one night. Mary comes ashore and presents herself at Carlisle Castle. and basically saying to Elizabeth, her cousin, Queen of England, look, please help me. I have lost my crown. 2 crowns. Queen Elizabeth, Queen Mary. Queen Mary of Scots is saying, I've lost my Scottish crown. You are my cousin. You are the Queen. You believe in divine rights of monarchs. Please help me to get it back. Wow, this puts Elizabeth in a very, very tricky situation. What should Elizabeth do? Now then, this is a big problem. I'm going to go through the possible options, and then you can have a think and make your decision. If you were Elizabeth, what would you do? Well, option number 1, what could she do? Give you a little clue. None of the options were completely good. Some of them, well, they all had potentially quite bad or disadvantaging points. Option number 1. Elizabeth could help Mary to regain her Scottish throne. She could do that. She's got the power. She could send the English army up to help. So that's option 1. Would she do that? Well, here's a couple of things to think about. Mary Queen of Scots is a threat to Elizabeth. Mary Queen of Scots is a Catholic. Mary Queen of Scots has got an heir. And Mary Queen of Scots was the heir from Elizabeth. So maybe she might not do that. On the other hand, Mary Queen of Scots was the legal, legitimate ruler of Scotland. If she decided to help send Mary back, is she then helping France, which is England's enemy, because Mary Queen of Scots is closely linked with France? Oh, it's a tricky one. It's a tricky one. Maybe Spain, maybe the Pope might get involved on Mary's side because they're Catholics. So would Elizabeth be helping those people who are not necessarily her friends? Option 1, help Elizabeth go back, help Mary go back and reclaim the throne. Number 2, option number 2. Elizabeth could say, no, I won't do that. I'm not sending you back and helping you get the throne, but I will allow you to go abroad. Yes, you can go abroad and maybe get help from Spain, the Pope, or most probably France. Would Elizabeth think that was a good idea? Or is she again possibly helping her enemies to get stronger as a threat against her own rule? She's a Protestant, remember. Option number 3. Elizabeth could send Mary back to Scotland, but she'd have to then face trial. There'd just been a battle between Mary's army and the Scottish nobles' army. If she was going back to be put on trial, bad things, she might get put in prison or worse. Why might Elizabeth think that's not a good idea? Well, number 1, she was her cousin. They were related. Number 2, she was the legal ruler. Remember what I said about Elizabeth strongly believing in the divine right of monarchs. Elizabeth hated the idea that somehow a legal monarch like herself could be overthrown. Also, if she sends Mary Queen of Scots back to Scotland to face trial, would that upset other countries, for example France, and increase the threat of foreign invasion from France? So that's another option. Option 4, execute Mary. Wow, my goodness me. Execute. What do you think? Well, number 1, of course, Mary was her cousin. They were related. Number 2, although Mary was a potential threat, as of yet, she hadn't actually done anything against Elizabeth. All she'd done is come to England and said, will you help me get my crown back? So she hadn't actually done anything against Elizabeth yet. So maybe she might not choose that one. Option 5. She could say, right, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll keep you here nice and safe in England for now. Now, to make sure you're very protected, I'll put you in a really nice castle. I want you to stay there, and then you're in the castle, everyone's safe, no problem, whilst we look at the situation in Scotland and see what's happened and see if we can come to an answer. Now, that's a nice way of saying I'm putting you in prison. So there are the 5 options. Have a think. Option 1, help Mary regain her crown. Option 2, send her abroad. Option 3, send her back to Scotland to face trial. Option 4, execute her. Option 5, imprison. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. What would you do? What would you do? Well, Elizabeth chose option number 5. She decided the least bad option for her was to put Mary into a castle and keep her here in England. In a way, put her in prison. That's what she did. So this changed the situation. Because, remember what I said about the Catholics? Many of the Catholics accepted Elizabeth's religious settlement, but some didn't. Some did not. And now all of a sudden, in England itself, yes, she's in prison, in a castle, but she is in England. There is a Catholic potential Queen of England. Because if Elizabeth died, the heir to the throne is Mary Queen of Scots. So the situation for Elizabeth has changed. Wow. Mary Queen of Scots. Possible exam questions. The old-fashioned, very simple, traditional 2 features. 2 key features of Mary Queen of Scots' threat to Elizabeth. Well, I've just told you about a couple of them there. Or they might say, explain why Elizabeth was unwilling to execute Mary Queen of Scots. Or explain why Elizabeth was unwilling to send Mary Queen of Scots back. That idea of the options that I ran through there. So, there we have the end of our first section. We've looked at the first 10 or 11 years of Elizabeth's reign. Yes, she had many problems and challenges. If you remember from one of my previous videos, Ruffle, R-U-F-F-L-E. If you can't, go back and have a look at it. But the situation is now changing. Mary Queen of Scots is here in England, and other things were going to happen. So we're going to move to section 2, the next part of the course. Section 2, what's that all about? Challenges to Elizabeth at home and abroad, 1569 to 1588. So about 20 years, the next 20 years, the challenges, the problems increase. And Mary Queen of Scots is right at the centre of that. And we'll have a look at it in some of the next few videos. As ever, I hope it's been useful. 2 crowns, 2 queens, 2 cousins. Things are about to get very, very interesting. I know you can't wait for what happens next. I'll speak to you soon. All the best now. Take care.